Hey, this is A's Gallo, and in this video I'm going to be doing a review of a new piece of software called the PioSolver. Before I start, I want to say I don't work for PioSolver. I'm in no way affiliated. I am not making money for this. I'm just a poker player who understands a little bit about game theory, and I was very interested in this program when it came out, so I bought it, and I've been playing with it for a little over a week. Uh, and I figured I'd do a review for those of you who are considering buying it or maybe have just bought it and don't fully understand everything about it yet. Okay, so to start off, I just want to get it out of the way that I don't think this program is some silver bullet. I don't think that it's something that you can input even accurate ranges and get result ranges that would be these unbeatable, you know, magical GTO ranges that nobody would be able to beat you with, and everybody better hope that they just play according to the same strategy, or else they're just going to lose. I don't think that's the case here. It's pretty obvious that it's not the case. Um, I do think, though, that this is a very powerful tool, and I think anybody trying to learn a good bit about uh, poker just to get a better understanding of how the game works on deeper levels should be playing around with something like this or somewhere along these lines. I think this is really really powerful stuff for your game. Um, so what is PioSolver? Um, it's a solver for epsilon equilibrium, meaning it doesn't solve for like a perfect Nash equilibrium. It does epsilon equilibrium, which basically means that it's close enough to be pretty good. It's not the fully solved solution, but it can get pretty damn close. Um, when you get your results, you will know what the distance is between a Nash equilibrium and the equilibrium that you're looking at. And the reason we can know that number is because it's a lot easier to figure out how far away we are from an ash than to actually figure out an ash. Like taking a solution and seeing how much it can be exploited for is very easy, but finding the optimal solution is obviously very, very hard. Um, so this program can solve epsilon equilibrium for arbitrary ranges, meaning that ranges that you input, and you can input any range you want. You can select any hands unrestricted, set different weights to each hand, and it solves them with some very tight betting constraints. Uh, at the moment, the order that the bets go in doesn't matter like which player's betting. It's just in order whoever bets first bets X amount, and then the second bet is Y amount, and it doesn't matter if it was the same player or if it was a 3 bet or a C bet on the turn after calling the flop. They just go in that order. I know that I've talked to the developer, and I know that they're going to be changing that and making it so you can set which bets the player is going to make in order and have both of them choosing different sizings rather than this restricted one that we have now. Um, it's also restricted to just the one bet size per betting round. And I'm pretty sure from talking with him that uh, more bet sizes are on the horizon, at least on turn and river situations, and probably coming to the flop in the future. I don't have any time frame for when, but obviously the more bets that you can include for each decision, uh, for each branch in the decision tree, the usefulness of the results I think would increase exponentially for each one up to a certain amount. But definitely two would be incredibly better than one, and three would be a lot better than two or one. Um, so that's an exciting thing to look forward to. As far as the accuracy of the results, I can't speak to them. I just am not smart enough to uh, know how to dig that deep in, and even if I was, I just wouldn't have the time to do it. But I do know that there's a lot of people who have this software who are running a lot of trials on it and trying to uh, see if they can find any mistakes being made. But so far, nobody's mentioned any, and from all the results that I've gotten, which I've run quite a few simulations, everything looks pretty good. I've done some toy games, and the answers you get fit in for what they should be. On to how to use this. So this is the PO viewer, which is the part of the software that connects to the PioSolver, which is I guess the heart of the program. Um, the PioSolver can be standalone, and I guess the reason for that is for people who want to be running scripts. It's easier that way, I guess, for them to access it that way. You can run like if you have the pro version, you can run scripts that say maybe you can make a queue of like which scenarios you want to do, and you don't actually have to be at the computer waiting for one to finish to get the other one to start, which is pretty cool. But I'm definitely not savvy enough to figure out how to do that, and I'm not all that concerned with it at the moment. So in PO Viewer, what you want to do is go to the Tree Building and Calculation tab, and this is where you can set up the scenario. So say you're trying to analyze a spot where the flop is maybe ace 5 2 rainbow. You could set it up like that. You could pick the starting pot on the first decision of the flop. Say it was 200, and then you can choose bet sizes. Now you have a couple of options for how to set these up. You can do it by percent. So say you wanted it to go in order like 50% pot bets, and your last number needs to be what the effective stacks are. So let's say here that effective stacks on the flop were like 1800. So here you would have the first bet that goes in, regardless of where it comes from, is going to be a 50% pot bet. And then the next bet, whether it's a 3 bet right after that bet, or I'm sorry, a raise after that bet, or a bet on the turn, is going to be just another 50%. And then the next bet, whether it's a 3 bet or a bet on the turn, is also going to be 50%. Um, and you can set these up for however you think most looks like what's actually happening in your games, or you can set up different sizings to try and figure out why certain ranges are chosen the way they are, and how sizing might affect some parts of the range. Another way you can enter bet sizes is just by actually entering in the amounts you think it's going to be. So let's say you think the first bet is going to be like 120, and then the next bet is going to be like 300, and then the next bet is going to be 700, and then the next bet is going to be all in for the 1800 that was left. It would be like that. And you can also do equal fractions of the pot to get it in by the river. So for that, we could do, let's say we want to make it 3 equal fractions of the pot. You would do 3e, and then the number of the effective stack. So you see that the bet sizes go in equal fractions from 167 to 612, and then an all-in for 1800. And you can change the 3 to whichever number you're trying to get to. So I believe those are the only options at the moment for it. I think they're pretty good. I am really looking forward to the change that the developer is talking about making, which is where you can just say player one will choose these bet sizes on the flop, and then we'll choose these bet sizes on the turn. um, and then set different ones for player two. And I think that in a lot of cases, especially the deeper you get, it'll be a bit more accurate because I think some people will have like a 70% pot C bet and then 70% turn two barrel, but will not raise a flop C bet for 70% pot. Uh, yeah, I guess that's all there is to say about that. Now, going into ranges, you have the out of position players range and the in position players range. These were labeled as hero and villain. Uh, I wasn't a big fan of that, so I just changed it to out of position and in position because it got a little bit confusing when I was setting up the hand, and my seat was where the label was villain. Um, but pretty easy to change. You can just go to configuration and pull up this and change the names of the players. In this tab, you can select hands, and you're free to choose absolutely any range you want. On the right hand side, you have a slider for what weight you want to give to a certain hand, and you can also just type in manually and select hands like that. Uh, I think the way that these hands are written out, it makes sense. They look fine. It's currently not compatible with something like Card Runner's EV, like just being able to copy and paste the range and throw it in there, which of course is disappointing, but I'm sure in the near future, uh, either one of the developers of PioSolver or Card Runner's EV is going to have a way to uh, transfer ranges in and out. And that'll be pretty good because I think some tools like Card Runner's EV make good complements to tools like these and vice versa. Uh, I think that about does it for here. So when you set up what ranges you think players are going to have, you would then want to make the option of starting the game tree with out of position decision or not. This is here because in a lot of cases you're looking at spots where somebody raised pre-flop, somebody calls, and is out of position. And there are a lot of scenarios where you can be fairly confident that people just do not have any leading range in those spots. And in order to cut down on the game tree, where we're pretty sure that out of position's ability to lead out is not going to drastically change the EV of either player's range, we could just do away with it and start the tree from the second decision and really save down on calculating time. So you want to make sure that you have this checked if you do want to start with that decision, but keep an eye on the times that you don't need to use it because it really will cut down on time. Once you have everything set up the way you like it, you would click the build tree, and on the right hand side you will get a build tree OK message, and from here you can hit go. I'm not going to run it right now because I have this software capturing the video and it's just going to bog down my machine. It's going to run for a while and it'll give you I'll show you in a second what it gives. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and try it here for the video. Or I'll start a turn decision, which will be a lot easier. Or even better, a river decision. Okay, so we're gonna clear that, build a tree, and we got the OK, so we're gonna hit go. And you can see here that it's running away, and we can stop at the moment with the ranges that we set up, which is obviously pretty easy. And this board, we've come to a Nash distance of 0, meaning that we found a possibly perfect Nash range, or extremely close to. On the right hand side, you're going to see exploitable for, and this number is how much the strategy is exploitable for in chips. So if this number is like 1.00, that means that it's exploitable for one chip, and this is a 200 chip pot to start and 1800 chip effective spot. So that would be, a fairly decent solution, considering how uh, small one chip is relative to the numbers at play. Uh, that number is not super critical to pay attention to. The exploitable for is, I think, where it's at for you. I saw a chart that the creator of this software, I want to say his name is Piotr, which would make sense for the name of the software. He said that something like zero point 0.5 was a really good solution, and zero point 0.3 was like a very, very, very good solution that you usually won't need to go that close to seeing. So just keep that in mind. Something around a zero point 0.5 is going to be a nice solution to get to, and something around zero point 0.3 is going to be like really, really amazing. Uh, so you don't want to just keep the thing running longer than you need to if you're kind of just trying to get a glance at what the solution looks like roughly. Um, I'm going to go ahead and open up a solve that I had already done, and we'll take a look at the browser section of the software. And I believe, yep, this is it. Actually, let me open up a different one. Okay. So this one is just one that I'm more familiar with. This is I believe, an MTT spot, 75 big blinds deep with antes in play. Um, Under the gun versus big blind flat. So the starting pot is 128 chips, and the board comes down: Jack of clubs, seven of hearts, six of spades. This was all set up uh, on this end, and we can see that this tree starts without the out of position decision, because this was a spot where I didn't think that out of position was going to be leading anything or much of anything at all. Not enough to make much of a difference. Uh, the EVs that we see here is EV of hero in chips and EV of villain. Hero's Mez, which I believe is maximally exploitative strategy. Um, and we can see that the Nash distance is 0.234 chips, which is a pretty small amount. This is down to a 0.18 solution, so this should be pretty good. I actually left this one running, I believe, and stepped away from the computer, and when I got back, it had just stopped itself. So let's take a look at the first decision. We're going to go ahead and click on strategy here, and we can see in red everything that the in position would be betting to 128. Uh, for this particular setup, he would be betting pretty much everything, and playing a mixed strategy with a lot of hands. I think at some points we can see like some checking back with 0.031, which is percentage. 1.0 would be 100%, and like 0.9 would be 90%. So like when we see stuff like 0.031, I think we can go over and check the strategy in EV and see that usually it's because betting is actually what you're supposed to be doing 100% of the time. It's just that the way this program is set up, it doesn't round things off at the end because it's not all that critical. So you get these like, you know, uh, 2 and 3% uh, decisions that don't make sense because something else was a higher EV. Yeah, it's a little bit off. That has to do with how far we are from an actual Nash equilibrium, and you know, I think is just the way that the algorithm is set up to get to its solutions. The creator of the software told me that it just doesn't round anything off at the end. But he seems pretty confident that it's not something that's going to matter, and I would agree. For instance, when we see here that seven of spades, seven of diamonds is going to be checked back 0.002, that means that it's going to be checked back 0.2%, uh, which means that it's probably better to bet. And we can go ahead and click over on strategy and EV. And now when we mouse over, we're going to be getting the EV of a play. So we can see that the EV of 7-7 actually is higher as a bet, 296.73 versus 287.81. So, keep that in mind when you see these little tiny percents to check over at the EV, and just make sure that uh, the EV of one action is actually higher than the other, which means that it should be in there 100%. So we see both of those views. We can also do squares to proportional weight, which would show you how much of each hand is actually in our range at this decision point if we followed the strategy. So here, everything is going to be in there, and once we get to our next decision point, it's going to be a little different. We can click on bet or check and get a view for which hands we should be betting and checking, and you can see that the weights of some narrow down, and you can see these little gaps around them. And the same for check. And this is pretty good. I think this is the secret to using this software, is to just look at the data through all of these views, because it's important towards understanding why hands are in the ranges they are in. We also have buttons for seeing out of positions range and in positions range. These will be with proportional weight. You can also see out of positions EV and in positions EV, and it'll just give you this. Red would be lower EV, and the closer it got to green, the higher EV it would be. So we can see, for instance, on a Jack 7-6 board that 7-7 would have a pretty high EV, Ace Jack would have a pretty high EV, and something like 2-2 would have a pretty low EV. Moving on now, let's say that we want to look at the decision tree after a bet from the in-position player, and take a look now at the out of position strategy, and we can see all of his hands here and what he would be doing. Blue is fold, green is call, and red is raise still. We can again click on any one of these to get to see a view of the parts of the range that would be corresponding to fold, call, or raise. We can see strategy and EV to mouse over hands and see their EVs. And now moving onward, let's say that there was a flat call. We would get the option to put up a different card for the turn. So let's say the turn came a 9 of hearts. It seems like it would be a pretty interesting card. We can start with out of positions decision now. And going back to this start tree with out of position decision, this is just for the first action, so out of position will obviously start turn with his decision. And we can see that out of position here would pretty much be checking 100% of the time. There is some pretty small bets, but I would assume that the EVs of those hands that are betting, like Jack 9 suited, is going to be lower than it would be as a check, or the other way around. So Here I would assume that we're just checking 100% of the time, and that just has to do with the solution not being uh, completely converging on actual Nash. So when we see a check, we can take a look at the imposition player's range now, and we see that it is excluding little bits of the hands that may have checked back the flop. Uh, Something I want to get to, there was a question in the thread that was answered about why there are, if you look in strategy, why there are answers to the EVs or what play would be made with hands that should have been, say, folded or checked on the previous street. And the reason is, in order to know the full solution, we would need to know how those hands play on this turn and on every turn against every type of decision. So in every tree, there will be an answer for every hand, even if that hand should literally never get to that spot. We need to know its EV in that spot to know that it shouldn't ever be getting to that spot, if that makes sense. So, for instance, when we start this point and we see that we should pretty much always be checking from out of position, we can still choose the option of bet and see what we would do in response to the bet, even though it should never happen, and uh, say if there were a raise, we can see the response for the out of position player, even with hands that should have never gotten to this point. That's what the proportional to weight thing is good for when you're looking through that view, to just see which hands have been eliminated. I think that about wraps it up for this. I think I've covered everything that I can think of. Um, Turn and river decisions for PioSolver are, I believe, come uh, free with the trial software, and they are pretty quick and very accurate. Flop decisions are where the money starts. The basic version of the program runs a little bit slower than the pro version, but has much of the same functionality minus the scripting options. And then there's a higher version, which at the moment doesn't make much of a difference, but I guess puts you on like a VIP. Your suggestions will be more likely to be implemented quicker, and you might get access to some things that other people wouldn't get for a while. Overall, I think it's a really, really cool software. Um, I think the power in it is in understanding why the software chooses the hands in the way that it does, and not necessarily for taking the ranges exactly as they are and implementing them in game. Because those ranges are just very susceptible to different bet sizes or different pre-flop ranges that you maybe didn't account for. So an example would be starting from the root here from your first bet. You might be betting more. The strategy might have us betting more here because there's no anticipation of somebody just jamming over our bet of 76 or making some 2 or 3 times pot bet. We know that it's either going to be a call or a raise to 216. So if you were to follow strictly this strategy, it might be the case that you wouldn't perform well against somebody who was using a bigger size or smaller size raise. Um, if they were following the exact raise sizes that you laid out, then it's pretty hard to argue against using the strategy, but it just seems like it's dangerous to just assume that they would be the best strategies to use all the time. I guess the closer you got to shorter stack play, maybe in 3 and 4 bet pots, where you can be pretty confident of the sizings that people are going to use, uh, those solutions might be a lot closer to something you might want to actually use in game. But yeah, again, The value is just seeing why it shows these ranges. So you can uh, go in here and change different turn cards and see how well the range that was selected performs on all these different cards, and then figure maybe it chose to bet more often on the flop here with 10-9 suited than 10-9 of diamonds because 10-9 suited has a backdoor flush draw. Or maybe you'll see instances where the same hand with backdoor flush draws will be bet at different frequencies based on whether it's a flush draw from the seven of hearts or a flush draw with the jack of clubs. Both of those could be very different results because of the blocking value that a jack of clubs might have versus seven of clubs in the opponent's range. Uh, this was all a bit long-winded, and again, I think I've covered everything I wanted to say. Hopefully, you'll find this helpful. If there's any questions, let me know. I will probably be doing a side-by-side comparison of PO Viewer and another GTO software that's out, but that will not be at least for another week or two. And yeah, aside from that, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments or message me on 2plus2.